Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service. I'm sure this is a subject that, of course, is resonating all across the world today. Trump's 2.0 presidency, but we are focusing on how it will impact Africa as a continent, but specifically Nigeria. So welcome. Let me quickly introduce our guests. Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a well-known face on Good Morning Nigeria, but it's been quite a while. Good to see you, sir.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Compliments of the season to you.
Same to you.
All right. Also joining us on the program is Ambassador Usman Sadiki, former Deputy Representative of Nigeria to United Nations, and also a very familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. The last time you joined us from Geneva. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Good morning. Thank you.
And we have also been joined here in the studio by Arms Free Ajanaku, Executive Director, Grassroots Center for Rights and Civic Orientation. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, gentlemen, let's start. There's so much to talk about Trump's 2.0 presidency. I'm sure that we'll try and see the much we can accommodate in the 1 hour, 40 minutes or so that this program will last. But I'd like to begin. I mean, his speech was actually a confirmation of his campaign promises, of his campaign speech, you know, most of them reinforcing some of the things he said during the campaign. But is it really, Joe Keshi, Ambassador Keshi, did it come to the world as a surprise? I mean, if you know Trump's characteristics.
Not really, but I'll come to your I'll answer your questions. But let me just make a reflection on the ceremony itself, because we're all focusing on the policy and not what we should learn from what we saw. And I'm saying this because I want to appeal to our security forces, the police, the military, the DSS. I hope they saw, and the media, by the way, I hope they saw how seamless the event was. There was no ADC. There was no chief security officer. There was no special assistant. There was no media running around the whole place, insisting on sitting behind their principals. From tradition, they don't even get into the hall. What we are seeing now is a carryover in Nigeria, it's a carryover from the military. So I sincerely hope that, I always say to people, if you don't know what to do, watch television. You really don't. So we should also not just be talking about policy, Trump and the rest, but we should also see how the rest of the world has maintained the standard over the years that has broken down in our own system.
I thought you would also mention political leaders, because you also saw the immediate past president seated.
Yes.
You know,
no ADC fight, because what we've seen in protocol here is that all these guys come in, they start fighting protocol officers in the ministry and the presidency. That, no, I must sit behind my principal, I must do this. Then when you challenge them, they say, it's security. Security is supposed to be outside there guiding the door. So if there's anything here, they can take out their principal easily.
Okay.
So I thought I'd make that, that point. But look, it didn't come as a surprise, all what he said. You know, I've always looked at inaugural addresses as inspirational. Let's go back to a few. JFK's inaugural address, even Reagan, even Obama's, they were very inspirational. This was more aspirational, focusing on its campaign promises and the rest of them. Of course, he has started signing executive orders. But somehow, I have a strong feeling that quite a number of them will end up at the Supreme Court. But let me just focus on one, which is very interesting. And the reason why I'm focusing on this is that I'm not trying to be spiritual here. But here's the deal, and the ambassador can confirm this. During this period of the year in the United States, it's always very cold. In quite a number of places. In some areas like Florida, a bit of the South, it's also a time that you enjoy very good weather. I mean, I spent 6 years or so plus in Atlanta. I can't remember how many times we had snow. But this time around, the whole place is covered with snow. Because of snow, they moved the ceremony from the normal place into a very, not too big, the rotunda of the Congress. You saw the fire outbreak that has destroyed vast areas of some parts of, California, not to talk of the crisis they had in terms of, the Florida area, North Carolina, and so on, that quite completely wiped out villages. And yet, this man has pulled out from the Paris Club. At the same time, he wants to drill. You remember those lovely things he said, drill, baby, drill. And so he's in a situation in which climate change is becoming real to everybody. Trump is still living in denial of climate change.
We will take those issues.
So
one.
I just thought I'd make that
other.
point.
I just wanted to have, a panoramic view of what your perceptions are about, all that he said.
Okay, let me get to Ambassador Seriki. Now, I listened. I thought I listened carefully. I don't think he mentioned Africa. We are focusing on Africa. I don't think he mentioned Africa anywhere, except that you could infer that some of the things he promised or that he said he was going to do, or some that he has already started to do, will impact Africa one way or the other. But why should we be bothered?
Exactly. Thank you for raising that question, and it's a pleasure to be on the program again. Now, Africa did not feature even during the campaigns between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. It did not feature at all. And even if it did, it is just incidentally. But even incidentally, I can't remember, so I don't if you have. If
only once. It just mentioned Congo.
It didn't feature.
When
so,
he was talking of Haiti.
yeah, exactly, sir. So Africa is really in the back burner. But that shouldn't make us underrate ourselves. We are a continent of nearly 1 billion people or over. And we hold the vastest resources in the world today in terms of minerals, agricultural potentials, and everything. And America is just one country among many influential, powerful, rich countries that want to come to Africa to do business with us. So we have options. It's not as if we are like a horse that is tethered in one place and all your movement is just determined by the length of the rope that you are tied to the tether with. We have options. We have flexibility. So we shouldn't see ourselves as circumscribed by circumstances and tied to the United States apron strings forever. However, we cannot underrate or underestimate the United States. It's the richest, most powerful military power in the world today. And also, it is politically, diplomatically, the most influential country in the world. So because of that, and also because of the orientation of our economy, which is a capitalist economy, and also our foreign policy, our politics, democracy, presidential type, our foreign policy, diplomacy, and other things are pro-liberal, worldview. Therefore, at one point, we have to constructively engage with the United States. So Africa is there to openly welcome the overtures of Trump if they want, to deal with us. We will see the sort of people he will appoint, in terms of ambassadors to African capitals and also those who will man his foreign policy and national security establishment. During his first term, 2016 to 20, he actually emphasized rather the negative aspects of relationship with Africa. But in the end, he quickly sought to make amends by sending his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who came to Nigeria and visited other countries. And unfortunately, it was during his visit to Nigeria when he was sacked, And then his wife, what's her name?
Melania.
Melania, and his daughter, they came to some African countries. So that showed at one point he thought about Africa. And then the foreign policy of his first term was driven by containment of China and Russia in Africa. And this is very clear in the speeches of Rex Tillerson, his former Secretary of State, and also of John Bolton, Ambassador John Bolton, his former National Security Advisor. Both of them issued, they made very, very strong statements in relation to recalibration of American policy towards Africa in the light of contestation or rivalry between Russia, with Russia and China in Africa. We hope this time around it will not be so. We hope this time around the interests of Africa should come first. And by way of suggestion, I will say that he should look at his earlier initiative, like the establishment of the Development Finance Corporation and the Prosper Africa Initiative. And the Republican Party itself has what they call the Millennium Challenge Corporation. So under those frameworks, and for him to continue with the Power Africa of Obama and the AGOA of Clinton. So these are structural frameworks within which the entire African countries and individual, the entire continent and individual countries like Nigeria can engage with him. Let us not be apprehensive or unduly concerned about the fallouts or negative this thing. We are an independent sovereign country. In our own right, we are also strong and powerful. So let us not belittle ourselves and think as if we are a fly on top of a table. We are not. Really, we are not.
We're certainly not. But given the economic, disparities, I mean, and of course, what happens to, your trade balance and trade deficits, you get to be wary of the policies and programs that come out of the U.S. And Ambassador Keshi described the speech, content of the speech of President Trump as aspirational, which means, of course, you know what aspiration means. It talks about an ambitious goals and drives and all that, as against the inspirational speeches made by his predecessors, which of course evokes a feeling of, emotional feeling of sentiments and all that. What's your assessment of that? What do you make of this?
Thank you very much. And I think the Excellencies have really given lots of insights into the policies and what we can read from his inauguration speech. But I think the point to note is the question why people across the world, and particularly in Africa, are worried, is that the speech for an American president is kind of short on those indicators for global cooperation. And Ambassador Keshi has already talked about the Paris Climate Agreement and the fact that the whole world looks at America as the bastion of global cooperation, that country that leads, and we saw what happened in the first time of Trump, where he withdrew from the World Health Organization, withdrew from very important global agreements that served as a rallying point for the world to think about very key global concerns. And so when you look at this speech again and you see that, apart from the fact that it was short on poetry, it was uninspiring, and Professor Bolaji Akinyemi made this point very strongly yesterday. You also, see that whole America first and that sort of rabid nationalism that's kind of defined his first term is still, what is coming out to the fore. And in terms of how Africa responds, I agree absolutely that Africa should not grovel in terms of, because Africa has options now, and America actually recognizes that. America understands the fact that Africa is not just pandering to the West now. We have options, because in terms of infrastructural development, for example, we're looking towards the East, and we're engaging, China. We're having discussions, and so that's why even the Prosper Africa, initiative was not really the Trump presidency in the first term sitting down to say, okay, how do we cooperate with Africa? It was a containment policy, and that was why it was instructive that it was the national security advisor and not the Secretary of State that even had to put forward that announcement. So in terms of how Africa engages, I think this is where the whole philosophy around the non-alignment comes into play. The fact that we have to play to the middle, and I really like the fact that in the conduct of Nigeria's foreign policy under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, it has not been a foreign policy that is narrow-minded or a single-track foreign policy. It has been more of diversifying our our engagements, looking towards China where we need to cooperate in terms of infrastructure, the Belt and Road Initiative, and all of that. And then, of course, in terms of bolstering our democracy, looking also to the West and cooperating where necessary. I think the other very critical point I would like to make is that the Trump presidency, when they say elections have consequences, I think the second coming of Trump also takes us to that point to analyze some of the developments that have come up since he was re-elected in November. For instance, you will notice that the social media companies, all of the executives were there at the inauguration yesterday, and then they are beginning to change policies which have implications for Africa, Africa's stability, Africa's democracy. You look at Meta, for example. Meta has ended its fact-checking program in response to the fact that some of these things Trump doesn't like them, and so it means that Africa has to be prepared for a lot more misinformation. Africa has to be prepared to combat the disinformation that will come on those platforms, and Africa has to grow its own indigenous initiatives to be able to combat those things and ensure that they do not also affect our governance system. Because even in the recent times, we have seen that even within the Sahel and West Africa, we have seen an upsurge in disinformation. We have seen foreign information manipulation and interference, taking the center stage in our own parts of the world. So, in terms of how we then try to navigate, we must be able to develop homegrown approaches to tackling this, and not just have this this whole understanding that it's America that will come and do it and do some of those things for us.
All right, thank you very much. I've just been thinking, you're talking about how Africa should engage with the Trump presidency, and I'm wondering, Ambassador Keshi, what does Africa expect from America in the next 4 years? And I say this because along the line yesterday, Trump said he had learned a lot in the last 8 years. And you want to believe that learning, he probably has also learned from some of the mistakes he made. Of course, he hasn't changed from being fiery, but policies maybe appointments, for instance, he has gone and he made it clear for people who are going to be loyal to him, people who will do his bidding and carry it out to the letter. But what do you think Africa can expect, given your reading of the whole scenario? Well, early days, but at the moment.
I'm not too sure that Africa should expect much under the Trump administration. Look, a second term to start with, it's more or less a lame duck once you have a second term. And the fury with which he's signing
executive orders
is a clear indication of the fact that he wants to see whether he could do quite a couple of things to actualize his promises and things like that. I do not really know exactly what Africa wants to or should expect. But like the ambassador said, Africa should just prepare itself, develop itself. Because look, Africa is like a beautiful bride. It has all what beautiful brides do have. But if that beautiful bride do not take care of herself, nobody would care whether she's, pretty or not. We have all what it takes. Look, some of the critical minerals that both the Americans and the Chinese need for their cars, for their cell phones and so on, are in this continent. The only sad aspect of it is that we just allow them to come, take it away, raw. If we begin to process it in the continent and sell to them, Africa will make more money. Or the countries where in fact, including Nigeria, they will make more money. So my position is, forget what we should expect. Prepare yourself so that when they come to you, you are ready to engage them almost on an equal basis. It's an open market. So if you prepare yourself in all aspects, run your country very well, develop your human capital, resources, your economy, and things like that, you can be sure that they will come, and they would certainly want to do business with you. Trump is transactional. Look, we spent a couple of years trying to buy an aircraft, military aircraft from the Americans for years. And I remember also the challenges we had when we were in Liberia and Sierra Leone, just trying to buy night goggles. Not only did they refuse to sell night goggles to our military or to ECOMOG, they actually asked other countries not to sell to us. So what does that tell you? Trump came, and the day he knew that, look, we were looking to buy aircraft. For him, he wants to make money.
He's a businessman.
He said, to hell with it, sell.
Ambassador Keshi, that's why let us begin to look at how, again, we can make ourselves, marketable. And I like to look at AGOA. I mean, we've been talking about AGOA for years, Ambassador Seriki. AGOA is supposed to be a platform for sub-Saharan Africans to leverage, duty-free trade with the U.S. And we know that this is a platform that we have been, servicing in the area of oil and gas. In 2015, it was recertified. And then I think there were some issues, and then it was given another 10 years, which will elapse this year. Should a Trump administration not recertify AGOA, what can Nigeria do? How will that impact us in terms of oil and gas?
Yes, thank you very much. I think just like in any other country, President Trump will receive briefings from his key ministers or secretaries on foreign policy, on national security, on global security, on disarmament, and lots of things. We too here in Nigeria, our president should receive briefings from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Tugar, from the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, and also from his senior special assistant on international affairs and foreign policy, Ambassador Shola Inikanolaye, and also from the president of Arkan, who is seated here, Ambassador Joe Keshi, and also from the president of the Association of Foreign Relations Practitioners of Nigeria and other constituencies, so that these issues will be filtered for the attention of our president, that these are critical issues on the table for you to discuss with your American counterpart should the opportunity present itself. Remember, Trump during his first term met only with President Buhari and President Uhuru Kenyatta, from sub-Saharan Africa. So if you are to meet with President Tinubu, I think some speaking points, some briefings should be given to the president, and the AGOA issue, Power Africa and others should be there for him to say these are critical to Africa, almost existential in terms of advancing the well-being of our continent and the economic growth. We want you to be a partner, so continue with that program.
What should the content and context of the briefing
Well, it depends on where we are coming from. If the NSA is giving a briefing, obviously it will be around national security issues. And if the foreign minister is giving a briefing, it will be about Nigeria-America relation and the larger African continent.
But with regards to the AGOA?
AGOA will be actually factored in by the Minister for National Development and Budget for National Planning, Foreign Affairs, Trade, and other things, because it combines a number of departments and ministries. So the AGOA issue is simply an opportunity given to African countries to scale up or increase their participation or penetration of the American economy. How far we are doing it and across what sectors is the question we should ask ourselves. Okay. Countries in East Africa, Southern Africa, and even the island states like Mauritius and Seychelles, they are really fully utilizing that facility. I don't know to what extent we are doing that. Maybe because our market is big enough.
Principally in the area of exports, oil and gas exports.
Yes, exactly. But we should venture also into agriculture, textiles, shoes, apparels, and other things that we can produce very cheaply here, but of high quality to send to the Americas. So these are things that we can do. So I think I will advise that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, especially the minister himself, should initiate conversation with critical stakeholders. The academics in universities will have excellent professors who can give advice on how to engage with the Trump administration, and to develop background and policy papers for the government, and then to be submitted for the consideration of the president. Mm-hmm. Now, as we said, an ambassador and our colleague here said, that we have options. Very recently, last week, our president, His Excellency Bola Tinubu, was in Abu Dhabi attending a development summit. And he was in Riyadh, and he was in Qatar and other places. So the Middle East is becoming a critical partner, not only to Nigeria, but to Africa, in terms of development, investment, trade, and so forth. 2 weeks ago, the Chinese foreign minister came here, met with Mr. President, met with the foreign minister, to discuss bilateral relationship. So the rest of the world are actually coming to Africa. So we should really calibrate the relationship that we're having with each and every partner or power to see where the advantages lie and where challenges may arise in order to mitigate them and to also ameliorate such challenges. In terms of the immediate priorities for Nigeria, I think we should emphasize security because, like Ambassador Keshi said, he had shown, that is Trump, has shown the willingness to deal with us in terms of supplying military equipment. And we need those equipments. And secondly, I think we should emphasize the area of critical infrastructure, power, railways, ports, airlines, because most of our airline operators today, they need to re-equip their fleets. They need new aircraft, they need new facilities, even facilities for the maintenance and servicing of aircraft in Nigeria. We need those things. So if we speak with the Americans on transactional basis, they will be able to really consider those overtures and come to assistance. So it is not doom and gloom scenario, you know. It's also positive. And don't forget, he has only 4 years. We can really, you know, sit him out, stay him out, you know. Really, that's all. Just 4 years. There is nothing really.
When you say, if we have to wait him out, you don't know who comes after him. Perhaps he seems to have taken over the Republican Party. Maybe we'll have a protege who will run. But that's saying, Humphrey Ajanaku, Ambassador has described, you know, Africa as a beautiful bride, Nigeria, you know, by extension. And I'm wondering what you think the U.S. under Trump, the attitude of the U.S. under Trump will be towards the competition with China in Africa.
Absolutely, that's a very critical question because that's what I've seen both in the first term that, you know, drove his engagement with Africa, the fact that it's the foreign policy emerged out of this jitter about the role China is playing, and also realizing the fact that China has become more or less Africa's biggest trading partner. It has actually eclipsed the United States. In fact, the United States is more or less in a distant position now. China and Russia, they are kind of filling that void that has arisen as a result of U.S. own retreat, sort of retreat from Africa, the lack of engagement on the ground, and also the lack of discussion. Under the Democrats, there was more emphasis on the questions of human rights, the questions of programming to strengthen democracy in Africa and all of that. While that is good on its own, some of those engagements did not answer the fundamental questions and the needs on the continent in terms, for example, of infrastructure. So where the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative is talking about key questions around how to revamp infrastructure, even though we raise questions about the issues of debt and all of that, we have not seen a corresponding resolve on the American side to say, okay, how do we actually support the infrastructural development that Africa critically needs? For example, transportation has to become cheaper, for even production to be okay. Issues like electricity and all of that. So that has not come so much from the side of the United States, and Nigeria and Africa is looking elsewhere for that. And of course, that has actually ensured that China is now in the preeminent position in Africa.
The U.S.-Africa summit didn't do much, did it?
No, under Trump first time, there was no U.S.-Africa.
No, but there was. Under Biden, perhaps he would want to...
Yes. So, but like I said, that particular summit was really focused more on, and of course, that's the traditional thing with the Democrats. They want to focus more on the programmatic aspects in terms of human rights, democracy, and of course, we even saw some countries in Africa being kind of excluded from the AGOA over issues of human rights and gay rights and all of that. So I think in this competition, Africa and Nigeria, and I think Nigeria is playing that game very well, even though I also think that we should now bring in issues like the non-oil exports in the AGOA, because we are saying that we want to diversify our economy. We want to reduce overdependence on the oil economy, and we want to ensure that things like agriculture and also to support our manufacturing, small-scale businesses and all of that. We want all of that to happen. So we should be able to now leverage on those components in the AGOA, and then push for that with a lot more resilience. And I do not think this is just a government thing. We need a whole of government, whole of society approach to this to be able to take advantage of the American market.
I'm straight. Thank you. I don't know if Trump actually believes in the energy transition policy. If he's pulling away from climate change accord, and he's also reverting electric cars and all that. And then of course we heard him say drill baby drill, which means he will put more effort into the oil and gas. So while we're diversifying, we should also, improve in our production capacity. I mean, oil and gas production capacity. But let me stay on the dollar, because Trump has said, look, his administration would put every effort to ensure that the dollar is made stronger. And in fact, he did say that he will probably come hard on any country that tries to whittle, the value of the dollar. And we know that recently Nigeria became a partner of BRICS, and we know what, the plans of BRICS member countries are, to seek alternative trading, a platform against the dollar. How do you think, Ambassador Keshi, that this might impact, Nigeria participation as a partner in BRICS? We're not full member yet.
Well, look, let me just go back to one of the issues, and I think the ambassador addressed about America as vis-a-vis the other countries like China. My reaction has always been very simple. If the Americans want to challenge the Chinese in Africa, very simple, put some money on the table. If the Chinese are giving us $60 billion, America should put $100 billion on the table, and you will see things will change. If they do not do that, they are just wasting our time, period. If they do not do that, and that's when we should begin to take that. Look, what we need to realize is that I think the onus is on us, to sit down and decide where can we benefit from the Americans and focus on that. And there are a couple of areas. All this issue that you rightly described, democracy, human rights, they do not put food on the table, good as they are. And they don't help our economy much. I would even question how many American companies are in Nigeria today compared to how many Chinese companies, Indian companies, Korean companies, Japanese companies. These are the countries we should be concerned with, because these are the countries that are physically investing in Nigeria. Collectively put together, these countries I've mentioned, they probably have over 1,000 plus companies in Nigeria. How many do the British have? How many do the Americans have? How many do the French have?
But in terms of trade balance, our trade balance with China is lopsided, and we have a trade
Yes.
surplus with the US.
Yes, because you mentioned oil. But coming back to the dollar, again, for me, here is what we need to realize. When the EU was being put together and they were talking of the euro, the whole idea was that the euro, for them, will replace trading with the dollar. It has not replaced trading with the dollar. And I do not see BRICS replacing the dollar. For me, it's as simple as that. Look, the Americans do not have the kind of problems we have. When they need more dollars, they print it. They print it.
But the question the question is, Trump has vowed to deal with countries, that are trying to whittle the value of the dollar.
Look,
so whatever policies it comes with.
The problem is, it's all politics. It's all that tough-minded rhetoric. The truth of the matter is that they have been traced to the dollar for years, and nobody has succeeded it. For many more years to come, the dollar will remain the main exchange of business. No doubt about that. I'm not saying the BRICS should not try. They should. If they can, go ahead and implement what they are saying, using local currencies, and if they can do that and it works for everybody. If I'm right, I thought I read somewhere that India withdrew from doing that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if India, it just shows you that they have a very good reason to say no. Where we are today, we shouldn't take this risk. And I make the point, the Europeans, when they were putting up euro, it was to challenge. Dollar has not been seriously challenged. And again, for me, dollar is not whether the Americans have more dollar or that shouldn't be our concern. Our concern is to do what others are doing. If you improve your economy, if you improve your agricultural base, and by the way, we need to find out what we have gained from our growth. You said we focus on the oil. Some other countries in the continent actually focused on non-oil products. And they made a lot of money, from AGUA. And if this man, Trump, is going to renew AGUA, he'll probably look for all the details and see that, look, there's not much happening from a number of countries, so why should he renew it?
Do you exactly, I was going to ask, do you think he will renew it?
No, I don't know. For sentimental reasons, he could say, look, just put it there and let me be free from the Africans. But the truth of the matter is that we need to do some work and say, look, even this country, did we benefit a lot from, look, to the credit of the world, they've been putting a lot of policies and programs for us. And sometimes I say to myself, look, do these people think, or do we actually think seriously when they are putting all these programs and we have refused to capitalize on them So that's why I said we should look at exactly where do we want to benefit from the United States and focus on those areas. Yeah. And for me, it's in the area of human capacity development.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador
And security,
Keshi.
by the way, as Ambassador said. You know.
Now, Ambassador Seriki, everything we are talking about will boil down to the will of that administration. And I'm just thinking, what do we know about his critical appointments? Because these are the people who will implement whatever it is, and sometimes even change the minds of the man and guide him in whatever it is that they are involved with. What do we know about the individuals he's appointing and the kind of thinking that they have and what direction they are likely to go as far as it concerns us?
Yes, the first appointment that we should look to is that of the Secretary of State, and I think Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State. I don't know if he knows anything about Africa, really. I don't know. Or if he's interested in Africa. But that said, that is the first office we should look at. Then that of the National Security Advisor. And then the Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of Justice. Because the Secretary of Justice, or the Department of Justice, deals with issues like corporate regulation behavior and also anti-corruption projects and programs, whereby our agencies like EFCC and ICPC will cooperate with the US in order to stem the flow of capital from outside from our country, and also really to address the issue of corruption, terrorism, and so forth. So institutional, we have to examine the institutions and their relevance to our cooperation. Also, we look at the family, because his government is predicted to be family-based. His wife, very powerful. His son-in-law is Gerald Kushner, or somebody Kushner, of that name. Yeah. And then his daughter, Ivanka, and others. Then you have someone like Elon Musk, and others who are coming becoming very critical to the administration. So these are the people that we should deal with. And here I think I will call into play the role of people like our rich people, Dangote, Adenuga, and others who invariably will have contacts with their peers in America to say, look, rhetorics will not take you anywhere. And resistance or distancing ourselves from you will not also take us anywhere. So let us bridge the gap, come to a common understanding on the mutual benefits that a smooth and friendly relation between your country and us will engender, so that we can all benefit from that. And I think it is very good if our private sector leaders and also our political leaders grasp the essence of personal relationship, because Trump believes in personal relationship, calling somebody on the first name, patting people on the back and things like that. To say, okay, let's go along. It's just 4 years, and then we can weather the storm. I don't think he is going to be more militant than he was in his first term.
Probably won't be up to as much as that.
No, he will be. I think time will mellow him down, and the realities of office will dawn on him, because if he maintains that confrontational posture, he will spend the 4 years without achieving anything. Like Ambassador said, he will be running from the Supreme Court to the Circuit Court and other things, and his 4 years will just expire. So for us, Madam, Sir, is for us to sit down, just do some bullet points when we engage with them. Number one, youth empowerment in Nigeria is very, very critical to our national security, national development, social development. So we should look at that. Americans, how can you come in for us to work together to develop our youth sector? Human resources, like Ambassador Keshi says. This is the age of technology. Secondly, empowering of women, it's very critical in the economic sphere. How do they access capital? How can they leverage finance, technology, in order to advance their status and make them really competent and meaningful players in the economy? So even if we discuss these two sectors, develop the youth, and I think the Millennium Challenge Cooperation seeks to address youth and women. prosper Africa also will do so. So if we just pick those two areas, youth and women, that is enough in 4 years for us really to develop relationship and actually lift a lot of people out of their current condition to better and more prosperous future.
And I also think that even Trump's immigration policy, you know, no matter how we look at it, for us, you know, should be a platform for us to leverage and reverse the jackpot syndrome. You know, and
well, why should we oppose it? If we should regularize our own, you know, exit strategy or exit policy, so that only if you have regular papers, you leave the country. Exactly. You know, don't be a menace, you know, and bring bad reputation to our country. I'm
just concerned about Trump's move to withdraw from the WHO, and my concern, of course, is, I mean, rightly founded. Given the emergence of diseases, you know, recently we hear of the Wuhan, what is it called again? The latest disease.
Wuhan or something.
Sorry, what did you call it?
It's a virus.
It's a virus. Yeah, it's a virus. Just keep my memory, you know. And Trump already, we hear, has signed executive orders recalling and reassigning federal personnel that are attached to the office of the WHO. And if we know that WHO requires about between $2 and $3 billion annual budget, and US contributes majority of that amount. Now, if this happens, is the world going to be a safe place?
Absolutely, and I think if we say there are lessons learned, there should be lessons from COVID. And part of the lessons from COVID was that for the pathogens and all of those viruses that, you know, those pandemics that break out from time to time across the world, it's not just about one country responding or believing that, you know, it can contain it within its own borders. It's about, you know, having a playbook that the entire world, you know, the globe itself can have a global response. And the WHO provides the architecture for that kind of very comprehensive response and that kind of a far-reaching response that, you know, from whether from a preventive point of view or from a containment point of view. So this is quite unfortunate that President Trump will be signing an executive order, and, you know, that those lessons from COVID have not been learned. Even within the US, within the United States, the fact that, you know, he kind of wanted to play this isolationist politics and then think in terms of just US approach to its own you know, issues alone did not really augur well at that time. And I believe in the end, reason should prevail, and then you know, there will be global advocacy efforts. There will be think tanks which will be trying to weigh in on these and, you know, trying to convince him that this is not just a good move. The health and the well-being of people around the world is at stake, and America just has to take that position as a natural leader on issues like that. And that's where you have to give it to the Biden administration. They came on board you know, when COVID was ravaging the world, and they were able to stabilize things. They created playbooks which served as, like, you know, compass for the world to deal with a major health crisis that ravaged economies. And then we are now back to a situation. So because pandemics don't give any warnings. They sometimes, yes, you have surveillance, you have, you know, situations in which you know, all of the experts study how those things may come, but sometimes it just happens from nowhere, and then, you know, the world is caught napping. And so if you don't have that architecture in place, it becomes a big problem. But I think, just a final point, I think when that happened in 2020, I mean, during the pandemic, there were other global voices and global players that stepped up to the plate to also help support the response. So I think if he insists and sticks to his guns on this one, it may well be looking towards the EU and other adults in the room to
and that's what I was going to say, that it will leave an opportunity for others to step up and, you know, fill the space the gap that the U.S. will be creating. We will pause here for a break so that when we return, we get into the last lap of this conversation on Trump's presidency and Africa. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, where we have been discussing the Trump presidency and Africa. And two ambassadors and one, I don't know if I should say diplomat, but it's okay. We have three gentlemen in the house, and we've been trying to figure out how the Trump presidency, what it will be like for Africa in the next 4 years. Let me get back to Ambassador Keshi. A lot has been said. You know, we've talked about his appointments. We've talked about, what he's learned, the statements he's made, and the body language. But some of the things that will matter to Nigerians, particularly, you talk immigration. Is there a way that Nigeria, or perhaps Africa, can engage to see, the standards dropped a bit to be more favorable? I think that should be the word for Nigerians, for instance.
You mean in traveling to the United States,
yes,
or things like that?
Of course, legally.
Legally. Look, this is why I mentioned the issue of human capital development. Why do you think all the tech guys, after the election, went to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring? It was because they realized that the way this man was, going on, it will actually affect Silicon Valley. Because the bulk of the fellows who are involved in some of these technological wonders that we have are of Indian origin. So to protect the industry and then to allow them to continue to bring experts to that industry, they had to go to Mar-a-Lago to make peace with Trump, even though most of them contributed to Kamala Harris' campaign. The same thing we should do in this country. And by the way, in the early 60s, 70s, and 80s, education was one of those areas that, we did a lot with the United States. Particularly exchange, not just in the exchange of professors. There were quite a number of American professors all over our universities. Our universities were few then. And of course, they trained a number of our doctors. So if we focus on that area and work internally as well as with them, educated Nigerians who want to go over there to work, we have no problem. It is those that do not have the right qualifications, who probably just out of frustration, they have relations there, they want to go. Oh, by the way, look, the embassies have even tightened up and they have reduced, that kind of categories of people. But I don't think, I stand to be corrected. For now, I don't think we should worry so much about those he would deport. Its main focus is those coming in from Latin America. Particularly the criminal, Mexico, the criminal gang, and so on. But again, I make this prediction. He's going to run into a lot of trouble with that, because some of those that will be affected by the very sweeping, executive order, are those, apart from the criminal gang, there are a number of these people from Latin America in particular, that committed minor offenses like driving without license. And when they looked at their background, they have not legalized their stay. And one of the reasons why the last administrations did not bother was to allow them time to legalize their stay. They are married, they have kids, the kids are growing up in the United States. When you begin to separate parents from their kids, the emotional outburst all over the United States will force that program to a halt. Because he did that before when he started, separating children from their parents at the border. And everybody saw what happened. And it's going to repeat itself. Now, these fellows who've been in the United States for a couple of times, their lawyers are already set. Everybody is going to start rushing to the court, sooner than later. But for us, again, I say, look, Nigerians who want to go to in fact, more Nigerians left for Canada in the last couple of years than to the United States.
Because of more favorable immigration policy.
But the truth of the matter is that, look, because of our huge population, we don't have to worry ourselves if people are leaving. All we need to do is keep training more and more and more and more people. Where do Philippines makes quite a number of money from the diaspora? So also even India. So that shouldn't bother us. Let's just keep doing the right thing we need to do. Ensure we have an educated class. So anybody who wants to go would go legally because the world scene is look, Japan, for example, if you look at what's going on in Japan, Japan for the first time is now beginning to consider opening up its borders for foreigners to come in because they need labor.
We are gradually winding down.
The population is getting old.
Yes.
Population is getting old.
We are
And
gradually...
the fellows, many of them are not getting married, they are not producing.
Yeah.
Ambassador Keshi, thank you. We have very few minutes and I just, Ambassador Seriki, I mean, if a country's foreign policy is driven by a national interest, and our own national interest is, of course, top of the list is security and then economic prosperity. And I'm wondering, is there a way we can, leverage Trump's protectionist policy in any aspect just to, achieve our national interest?
Well, he has not targeted us in particularly. He's looking at the developed economies, China, EU, Canada, and others, where he's going to impose tariffs on imports of electric vehicles, for instance, steel, chemicals, and so forth. In our own case, our greatest trading commodity of the U.S. has been oil. So if they are going to buy more oil from us, let us leverage that and sell more oil to them. And also, we should seek room for export of agricultural products from Nigeria. And in that way, we are going to develop our agriculture. We can even ask them to come and really, do the farming here, bring their farms, equipments and other things. We have the land, we have the water, we have the elements. Let them come, bring their expertise to farm here and also export to their country. This is the way we have to go. But most importantly, let them come and help us in really upgrading our universities in terms of laboratories, in terms of teaching aids, in terms of facility, in terms of really exchanges of programs, like Ambassador Keshi said, so that the critical need of manpower, trained, educated manpower, can be spread across the country in order to service different sectors of the economy and other essential areas. So organizing ourselves internally is very critical in the way we approach the Americans and how they take us seriously. If we manage our affairs loosely, in a careless manner, then they will say, look, these people are not serious, and they will go to Ethiopia, they will go to Morocco, they will go to Egypt, they will go to Tanzania, Angola. Kenya, Angola, and other things. The Lobito corridor that the Americans are developing today is a very critical infrastructure development that is a counterpoise to the Chinese Belt and Road in order to extract minerals. If we are very serious, they will come and look at us and say, okay, we are going to participate in your West Africa gas pipeline to Morocco, to Ghana, Senegal, Morocco, or the Trans-Sahara pipeline and things like that. They can do that if we scope it well. But beyond that, as the leading country in Africa, we should intimate the Trump administration of the AU Agenda 2063, what it means, what it entails, and how pivotal Nigeria will be. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and also the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA, Very recently in Kampala, we met Africa to discuss the common African agricultural program, CAAP. So these are areas where we can sit down, put everything on the table and discuss with them.
Okay, I'm straight. I know protectionist, from history. Protectionist policy has, never been known to last, quite long. I mean, these same world powers, practice it post-war, world wars and all that. But again, do you think there is an extent to which we can also apply it, in relation to our dealings with, our African nations? Because we've been practicing big brother foreign policy for too long and it hasn't paid off.
No.
Yes, so in terms of how that works within Africa, the manifest destiny of Nigeria, and yes, the manifest destiny of Nigeria, and that manifest destiny still remains sacrosanct, because Nigeria, if you even look at the Renewed Hope agenda of Bola Tinubu administration, where he is pivoting the foreign policy or the intellectual analysis of how the foreign policy should go, it still puts Africa at that centerpiece. But I believe that increasingly, even the question of the limit of our resources is already programming us to now look internally. For example, with the subsidy.
I agree with you.
Yes, the subsidy. The president said he cannot be Father Christmas anymore to the rest of West Africa, and which is quite sensible, because you also have to manage your resources, because Nigeria's population is on its own is huge, and catering for that huge population would definitely mean that we realign our priorities, and so I think those things will come naturally, but I wouldn't want it to be like a Trump gung-ho kind of protectionism, where you talk about slapping tariffs on everybody, and then in the end of the day you create drawbacks for cooperation, and you also do not allow for, because at some point you have to also cooperate with your neighbors.
You will need others.
Yes, you need others. Absolutely.
All right.
Just give you one information. I don't know whether it's basis of that. There are more Nigerians traveling to Benin, Togo, than Togolese or Benin coming to Nigeria. There are more Nigerians traveling to Cameroon than Cameroonians coming in here. So when you're talking of protection, what area are you looking at? Do we stop them? If you close the borders, we often do, it's we also. Yeah, because we are more enterprising than all these neighbors.
Yeah.
And all these neighbors depend on us. So let's bear that in mind.
And the African continental free trade, actually is a framework that does not permit this egregious application of protectionist measures. And within ECOWAS, we have regulations. So you cannot just wake up one day to say you're protecting what against who.
That becomes isolationism.
Because look, when we become developed, our first market is our neighbors.
Exactly.
Second market is the continent itself.
So we are not developed now.
We are developing.
We are developing.
Ambassador Keshi,
we are developing.
We've been
developing.
What's the biggest obstacle to Africa, to Nigeria now, being able to position itself, to be at a level where you can favorably bargain at that level, whether it's with the US or other world powers? What is the greatest obstacle? Some say it's corruption.
Ambassador Keshi, 60 seconds.
I don't think it's corruption. I think we need to, when you have a very strong economy, you're in a good position to bargain seriously with others. Even your leadership becomes very assertive. So build up your economy. It's as simple as that. Build up your economy. And you see, more people will even come and do business with you.
All right.
Is the economy stupid?
Yes, I think, under the Tinubu administration and under the leadership of the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, they have brought up this issue of strategic autonomy that seeks to position Nigeria vis-a-vis other countries in an advantageous position. and to give us more flexibility to deal with them according to our priorities. So if we deepen that, both in its theoretical and practical aspects, I think, the solution that you're looking for will come from foreign policy.
Okay, one last question, and it's a general question. America is for one gender, male and female. Ambassador.
Oh yes, this is very important to foreign policy. We have been battling with the democratic governments. In 2015-16, when we negotiated the Sustainable Development Agenda, I was in New York, they insisted, together with the EU countries, to put this LGBT or whatever it is into various projects. But the moment Trump came into office in 2016, the Americans dropped that. So it's better for us to deal with the Republicans on these issues of morality, on this issue, because they are conservative and they look more like African perspective. So it gives our diplomacy room, really, to have a common position with them. And I think I welcome that.
How democratic is that?
Yes, so within the context of our own sovereignty, and also within the context of our own ability to project, what our own societal values should be. To that extent, I think, that should be considered democratic, because we should not be in a situation where certain policies are shoved down our throats, without, in our own input in those policies. And I think the fact that much of the people who will shape the Africa department, of the U.S. under the Trump, they come from a group, called the Project 2025, which is a movement of conservatives that really are looking at how to restore core diplomacy in Africa, and not, going to all these issues of cultural diplomacy like we had under the Democratic administration.
Okay, I come back to you, the last, your view.
Much as I welcome what Trump said on this issue, I think we should be realistic enough to say that the horse has left the stable. When you watch almost all American movies coming out now, for some, I describe it, for some annoying reasons to me, almost everyone has a role for homosexuals. And it's just becoming annoying. Now, whether the film industry will now pull it out, it's another thing, but I doubt it. But when you look at it, when a president is talking or trying to unify, you must have the heart to unify all segments, whether they are annoying or they are not annoying. They are part, and the population of those in this business have grown tremendously over the years. That is frightening.
All right, I think we've touched virtually everywhere there is to touch. We just now have to watch and see how this whole thing evolves. It's a fine place to leave the conversation this morning. Let me thank Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's been a pleasure, as always, having you join us on this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And let me also thank Ambassador Usman Serki, former Deputy Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations. Thank you very much for joining us on the conversation. Thank you for your thoughts and your time.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm Free Ajanaku, Executive Director, Grassroots Center for Rights and Civic Orientation. Thank you very much for your own perspectives too. We appreciate your time and your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
All right, and that's Good Morning Nigeria this Tuesday. We thank you for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow, God's willing. I am Claire Adelabu Abdurrazak.
And I'm Victor Azu. Enjoy the very best of today.